This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Thanks all for joining the bi-weekly Door Heat Exchanger call. Just want to quickly go over the agenda today. Can everyone see my screen? Do I need to zoom in? Maybe a little bit more. Everyone can see it, right?
I can see your screen, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So first is, well, it's actually dependent on John Manosh joining the call, but I did join the ACF call earlier this week, and he did have a question about how server cooling controls and door heat exchanger controls could be more integrated. He said, if he joins the call, he would like to chat about this, and I'm sure, Mike, this would be a topic of great interest to you. We also have progress in specific focus areas that I'll go over based on offline discussions with Philip Jabari and Juan Carlos. And then there's been some offline communication between John Gross and Benny, who is off this week and the next, to continue the conversation on door heat exchanger deployments. Potentially either as a white paper or reference design. And it looks like this will probably happen after June the 5th. And then I'd like to spend some time talking about the fact that the 2023 OCP Global Summit is approaching. And there's a call for presentations that closes on the 16th of June. So I'd love for us to spend a good amount of time discussing areas that this community would like to submit, and then also elect POCs for the same. So it seems like John Manosh is not on the call yet, so we'll probably skip that item and maybe circle back later, depending on whether or not he makes the call. So in terms of progress on focus areas, Philip Jabari, Juan Carlos, and I had an offline discussion. Basically, our request was to Philip and his organization for engineering support. We had done this in the past with the white paper that talked about applications of door heat exchangers, different applications of door heat exchangers, and what those limitations are. The intention over here was to get additional data that would be necessary to support two specific white papers. One of them was densifying modular data centers with hybrid cooling. And then the other one was aluminum microchannel heat exchangers for door heat exchanger solutions, and how do they compare with the traditional coils that are generally used in such type of solutions. And Philip was kind enough to support this, and we anticipate feedback in the next week or so. I'll do just a quick brief overview of what we discussed. For those of you all who are not aware, we have this open document where we track exactly what we want to talk about in this white paper. So with regards to densifying the modular data center, we're looking at hybrid cooled racks, which is basically a combination of direct-to-chip cold plates as well as door heat exchangers. So these racks would be 100% liquid cooled. And we're looking at powers of 30 kilowatts, 50 kilowatts, and 70 kilowatts. And then we have two different distributions of how much of that power is liquid cooled and air cooled. And when we did have the offline discussion, we put together this table where we looked at the three different power levels, looked at how much of it is air cooled and liquid cooled, and we looked at different different air side delta T's, and and then the corresponding raw performance of the coil that would be required. In this case, we define it as cooling capacity over initial temperature difference. So it's a watt per Kelvin. And for the custom coil that we had looked at for the previous white paper, we've just requested that we get engineering support from Boyd to reevaluate these numbers and come back with data that we could then use for the white paper. It was a pretty fruitful discussion, and we're hoping to see updates on this in the next week or so. And then this will basically allow us to do the Dole heat exchanger side calculations that would be required for this white paper. And then beyond that, we'll work with the sub-project lead for modular data centers, which is Carl Rabe, and then a separate focus group to build the rest of the white paper. But from the Dole heat exchanger side, these are the calculations or the analysis that we have committed. And I believe, once we have these answers, we'll be able to make a pretty good dent in that. So that is one white paper for which we have requested engineering support. The other one is the white paper that Sankar from Danfoss presented on the call a few meetings ago. And then over here, it's more about providing reference information for what we consider as the I don't want to call it incumbent, but what we consider as the standard coil design or solution for Dole heat exchangers, which is the fin tube type. So Sankar, in the shared document, we have put down a bunch of reference data. We do recall how wide the coil is and what type of design it is, but we are waiting on two other dimensions, and I think that would be the volumetric within which you can explore what the capabilities of an aluminum microchannel heat exchanger would be. And I think that would be the part where we talk about comparing the two solutions. But I think the rest of the information, I'm sure you could write all of that with your eyes closed, but we wanted to have this information available so you can have that as reference. And of course, we'll obviously support you. We're here to help with putting this together, but this is the information we have so far, and we are waiting on a couple of details extra.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, John. Yeah, I have been not able to focus on this last 2 weeks because of some change in situation in my work situation, but I should be back focusing on this in the next week or so. So
no worries. Yeah. And we can, we here on the community are there to support you as needed, because I think this is going to be a good contribution. This is going to be an interesting white paper for the community.
Thank you.
Okay. Checking the attendee list, I still don't see John Manoj. So let's move on to the call for presentations. So this is an open conversation with the group over here. Basically, as for those of you all who are familiar with how we do the summits, we usually have engineering workshops that are organized under specific tracks. And then usually these tracks are a representation of the main level projects that are defined under OCP. So advanced cooling solutions, which covers Dole heat exchangers, cold plates, and immersion cooling, are covered under cooling environments. So we anticipate that cooling environments will have its own track. And then usually the process is the different sub-projects, whether it's immersion, Dole heat exchangers, cold plates, heat reuse, and advanced cooling facilities will basically contribute presentations or topics for presentations from the communities. and then we'll usually go through a voting exercise. So at this point, we can propose as many topics to submit for the global summit. I did take a bit of a stab at what I think could be potential topics. We could certainly do a dough heat exchanges sub-project update, especially for certain topics that are just being kicked off or not quite close to completion. A lot of this could be covered as part of the sub-project update. I think the white paper on densifying modular data centers with hybrid cooling should definitely be done well ahead of the global summit. And I think similarly, I think the the aluminum microchannel solution for dough heat exchangers, I think we can work closely with Sankar and have this sort of drafted and reviewed and put out ahead of the global summit. So as I see it, we have three potential topics to contribute to the collection that would then be voted on. Before we start talking about POCs, I want to ask the community here if there is interest, or does anyone have other topics they'd like to contribute through the dough heat exchanger group? Anyone?
So, John, just curious, when you talk about door heat exchangers, what kind of topics do you typically deal with? Is it just the performance, or is it something? I mean, what are the kind of topics that you would typically discuss here?
Yeah, typically the topics have that's a great question. So the mission of the group is to educate the general community on dough heat exchangers as a technology, but in general to also lower the barrier to adoption of liquid cooling. Now, one of the main requirements to be able to be eligible for presenting at one of the summits is that it should not be a commercial presentation. So if you believe you have something that could be of great interest to the wider community and in
Yeah.
general could be quite educational, then I don't see a reason why it could not be considered.
Okay.
Hi, John. One question here. We have three different technologies to discuss. The traditional one is it's common. Maybe we have not to think about that. But what about the connections between the CPU and the reactor in case we are working in series, also the hybrid solution? And what about the RPU connected with the reactor in case of the air-assisted system? Maybe could be very interesting to discuss about how to connect everything between the rack and the reactor, because maybe if we discuss about in which point we could connect the reactor with the RPU, with the CDU, and in which way, maybe we will solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, and
One.
that's a that's a great question. Was someone else responding or saying something? Yeah, Juan Carlos, I think that would be a great topic um, I would say like a specification for a dough heat exchanger for open rack V3. I think at that
Yeah.
point is when you become really, really prescriptive, right? As in, okay, if this open rack V3 has blind mate manifolds, right, and or has an in-rack CDU that's at the bottom, how would you interconnect the manifolds to the CDU but also the primary side connections to the door, and then eventually coming out of the rack. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Now, when it comes to writing a specification for a door heat exchanger, let's say for OpenRack v3, I think that would be a great endeavor. But I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure if that could be covered or finished by the global summit. So maybe that could be a part of the sub-project update where we could have maybe 2 or 3 slides dedicated to that. What do you think?
Yes, this is only an idea we have. Maybe we have to cover in which way is not the point.
Yeah.
Actually, John, that comes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jabari.
Yeah, that came up in the comments to the original requirements document. When you look at the manifold section at the end, and you compare it to the new blind meat manifold spec that I don't think we've released it yet, but we presented on it. Sorry, it was presented on by the full state group. Sorry, by the hardware guys, I think last summit. And it gets kind of congested at the base of the rack when you have a hot and a cold manifold, a CDU, and a door heat exchanger all to integrate at the base.
It does, and I think that's where these things need to be studied and evaluated, and then the appropriate recommendation needs to be made, or the recommendation needs to be okay, considering how tightly, like dimensionally, how tightly these components are located. Potentially you would have to look at swivel joints, and then the question is, okay, you probably have to look at pressure ratings and so on and so forth. So yeah, I certainly don't claim to be an expert here, but yeah, there are probably multiple challenges associated with making manifolds and a door heat exchanger work together, especially if they are blind mate manifolds on the rear side. And then you add an in-rack CDU to the equation, and then it becomes even more complicated. So we can certainly look into this. One thing we would have to consider is we probably need some sort of mechanical engineering support in order to do that, because it would involve sort of doing specific mechanical analysis on this. But yeah, it's definitely something that is worth looking into. Yeah. Yeah, so this topic, along with others that would be sort of in flight at the time the global summit comes around, will definitely be covered under the sub-project update. So we can use the sub-project update to talk about multiple areas of interest, or multiple areas of focus that are still sort of getting started. And then we can also use the global summit to solicit interest and engagement, from those who are interested in these topics, so they can join the calls and help contribute to the work. So yeah. So in terms of does anyone else have any other topics they'd like to suggest as part of presentations? Okay, if not, let's move on to defining POCs. So for the sub-project update, I'm thinking Jabari and Juan Carlos, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to sort of maybe volunteer you guys for this. Would that be okay?
Sure, no problem on my side, John.
Sorry, Jabari, what was that?
No problem for me. But
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, I was gonna say Juan Carlos is probably gonna be on one of the other two as well, or both. so
Yeah, no worries. On the microchannel solution, I think Sankar, you for sure should be one of the presenters. And then Philip, I'll kind of put your name down for now until you have like a specific person that you could recommend from your organization.
Oof, okay. Yeah, probably Chris again. But yeah, okay.
Okay, but do you mind if I put you down for now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry,
not
Sankar?
a problem. No, not a problem for me. I can do that. Yeah, I can
Okay.
work with whoever from Boyd. I mean, let's see how that should be okay. No problem.
Yeah, I mean it's just a matter of taking the white paper and putting it into
Presentation.
a presentation format. Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the densifying modular data centers, it'll probably be Carl and myself. I'll help out over here. Cool. One thing I did want to touch on is I'm going to be out for the next 2 weeks, so I'll most probably cancel the next call. What I will do is since the deadline for submitting the abstract is June 16th. Offline, I will reach out to all the POCs and let's maybe get an email thread going to put together titles and then a simple abstract for each of these presentations. Does that sound good?
yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds
sounds
good.
good.
Okay, awesome. So I'll take care of that offline. Okay. I did notice we have quite a few people who've called in who are probably feeling like outsiders. Apologies. But since we have time, I would love to hear from you guys as to what are your expectations of the Dough Heat Exchanger community, and maybe moving forward, what would you like to see the Dough Heat Exchanger community work on as part of through OCP? Anyone would love to hear from those who've joined the call today?
Absolutely. Can you hear me, John? It's Richard Bircher here from the UK.
Hey, Richard, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And thanks for reaching out, because sometimes you do sit on these calls in a bit of an abyss, and there's so much knowledge that exudes on the call, which is great. I kind of went bit of background about me. I went to the Open Compute Summit in Prague. Highly interested in the industry, looking at the kind of standardization approach. For me, in terms of the rear door heat exchanger, it's kind of to that point. I appreciate it's not a presentation, but how do you interconnect everything, I think, is a real key thing. When you're looking about adoption to the industry, it's breaking down the barriers of where are the boundaries? Why would you go one technology over another technology? Having that top up potential. And I think in terms of kind of building out, the standards so that increases the adoption. But for me, it's kind of trying to understand all the different elements of the technology, how they come together, where one kind of stops and when one starts. And for me, it's about kind of making it as easy as possible for it to be very fluid in the way that it all comes together as a system approach. You know, that's kind of how I'm looking at this and where I'm trying to get involved, I guess. You know, got history from an air cooling side, obviously penetrating through into liquid cooling as of now, and it's just kind of understanding all the roadblocks, how we overcome them, looking at things like pressurization, how you combine air with liquid, how you look at things like controls to kind of really bring that through. So apologies, bit of a rambling answer, but that's kind of where I am and just trying to learn more and get more involved with the community, really.
Yeah, welcome. And I think a lot of what you highlighted over there is very relevant. I think combining air with liquid, with the door heat exchanger, we do have multiple solutions. I think we've already talked about the hybrid solution, which is quite prevalent and popular in the HPC industry. But we're hoping to see a lot of that, some of that adoption now sort of trickle over to, I don't want to call it the hyperscaler side, but sort of breaking beyond boutique and sort of going towards larger deployments. And I think that's where having very clear definitions or standardization or a clear idea of what the capability is definitely relevant here. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks on the call would agree with that. So yeah, so welcome once again, and we definitely want to make sure that the contributions that are coming through the ACS door heat exchanger community and cooling environments in general, is answering a lot of questions that people have out there. So please, please speak up. Let us know, what other contributions this community should work on. Obviously, we do request that you sort of become a part of that process as well. But I believe we have a pretty solid group that attends the calls in general. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we can plan for and address a lot of the questions that the general community has given time. Yeah.
Greetings. My name
Anyone
is
else?
Alan. Yeah, greetings. My name is Alan Lash with D.E. Shaw in New York. We are an end user financial services company. I'm about to do a proof of concept on rear door heat exchangers. I've got one on order. We intend to attempt cooling 50 to 60 kW cabinets. If our proof of concept is successful, we plan on rolling out in a larger scale, probably mid of next year. So I'm lurking in the background, just listening and trying to gain whatever knowledge I can from the community.
Awesome. Yeah. If you, I mean, it's great to hear that you're already in the process of, evaluating door heat exchangers for 50 to 60 kilowatt cabinets. Is that, if you don't mind me asking, is your intention to kind of align with a lot of the solutions that are available through OCP, like OpenRack and OpenRack V3 PowerShells, OpenRack V3 base liquid cooling? Just curious.
We see ourselves going down that path as time goes by. Today I'm using conventional racks, but we believe to get the power density and the delivery of power that we are expecting, that we may end up going with open compute racks. Something that we're watching. Myself and one of my associates recently were at the last Open Compute show on the West Coast of the US, and we learned a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome.
Hey, Alan, I worked on the Honeywell mainframe computer that your company used 40 years ago.
I'm not sure that's possible. Our company isn't 40 years old.
You based in New Jersey?
My data centers are in New Jersey. The company is based in New York City.
But it was stock brokerage services.
We're in financial services. We're a hedge fund.
Okay, there's a Shaw. Okay, there's another Shaw company that's stock brokerage services.
Yeah, very, very possible, but I think it's unlikely. We're not that old yet.
Okay.
All right, welcome. Yeah. Anyone else?
Hey, John, this is Ben Tsai with Dell. I can jump in.
Yeah.
I spoke last week, or I'm sorry, last meeting, and I'll go ahead and echo some of the stuff that you and I have talked about in sort of an offline discussion. But basically, you know, again, Dell, you know, obviously a consumer of the technology, you know, ultimately putting together solutions for our customers. You know, we're interested in OCP because of, you know, again, the net benefits, or ORV3 specifically, in the net benefits of, you know, standardization, right? We trying to get into more of a leverage model, you know, move out of bespoke solutions, you know, specific to Dell. And I think we're all sort of in the same boat, kind of doing the same thing. You know, why not, you know, leverage some, you know, leverage learnings, economies of scale, et cetera, right? So again, I think there's a lot of great work going on here. You know, from the Dell perspective, you know, I think we're, you know, targeting a lot of customers in the AI, ML, HPC space, right? So the densities are particularly high, and that's where we're, I think, pushing beyond, you know, the intent of, you know, let's say specifically the ORV3 rack spec. You know, we're going to push into much higher densities. We're looking at 150 to 200 kilowatts per rack, right? We need 6 plus, you know, 25 kilowatt power shelves. We're going to have, you know, 10 to 12 whips in the back. We're going to have far more I/O in the front. So, you know, there's a lot of goodness, I think, to the ORV3 and things that we would like to try to leverage. But, you know, I think there's some things that, you know, ultimately it's a little bit misaligned with what we need. But, you know, ultimately we think there could be other OEMs, other consumers in this space that might also benefit from hearing what we have or what we're thinking, to see if there's, you know, some alignment there, and if it helps inform, you know, this working group and others, right? The overall community of like, well, maybe there's other, you know, things that we need to do to try to address those needs, right? Assuming that the need is great enough. So, you know, as you start to think about this specifically for this working group and, you know, the rear door heat exchanger, it's like, you know, what kind of heat does that mean I've got to dissipate, right? And, you know, you're thinking immediately into, you know, the 50 kilowatts ish into the air range, right? So that's you know, again, just to set some bounds on, you know, well, how do I do that? What are the feeds and speeds, that sort of thing, right? You know, and much like was said earlier, you know, we want to try to take as much friction out of the system as possible for our customers, right? We want to try to make this as easy as possible from an interconnects perspective, from a solutioning perspective, right? Try to take out some of the things that become ultimately very difficult for you know, our end customers to deploy the technology or even, you know, try to plan for, right? There's multiple steps in this end-to-end chain, right? And we need to be able to you know, make that adoption of the technology as easy as possible. And again, I think the great work here can help do that. And hopefully the perspectives that, you know, I bring and some of the others from Dell that are, you know, engaged at the multiple work groups can help inform that, and you know, hopefully be better together, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ideal scenario for the end customer is to make the deployment of liquid cooled racks as easy as the deployment of air cooled racks, right? I mean, that would be the ideal scenario for them. I'm not sure if that's completely possible, but I think a lot of work that we do through OCP could certainly you know, could certainly chip away at that gap and, you know, help with a lot of that for sure. Okay, awesome. So this is great. You know, I've already had an offline discussion with Ben on what he just described. For the others who are new and joining the call, this while we do give updates on work that we are working on, we also want to make sure that everyone can sort of join the call and maybe make suggestions for future efforts. And then it's just a matter of getting alignment on okay, how do we plan that? Where are we going to get the resources and support from? And then basically working it through. So really appreciate everyone joining the call and sort of talking up. And I think moving forward, the community or the Door Heat Exchanger group certainly would love to make sure that we are addressing a lot of what people are joining the calls for, gets worked on appropriately and contributed through OCP. So thanks. Okay. As stated previously, I'm going to be off the next 2 weeks, so I will cancel the next week's call, and then we'll reconvene in roughly 4 weeks' time. Offline, I will follow up with the POCs for the presentations, and we'll work through putting together abstracts and making sure that gets added to the FN Tech portal prior to the June 16th date. So if there's nothing else, thanks all for joining the call, and we'll talk in about a month's time. If you do want to get in touch with me prior to that, let me just quickly put my email address in the chat thread. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to have an offline conversation as necessary. If not, we'll chat again in 4 weeks.
Question for Richard. I know you mentioned that you didn't. Some of the stuff that we see on here is I guess a little bit esoteric or unclear because you're just not familiar with some of the things we are saying. When Juan Carlos and I mentioned the interconnection with the rack and manifold, did you need a visual representation of that, or were you okay to talk about that another time?
Yeah, Jabari, that would be, I think that was directed to me, wasn't it? That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think when I'm coming into these calls, I know that there's various wikis and things like that, and it's trying to navigate my way around and through to get the best value, as a two-way relationship, I guess, really. But yeah, Jabari, that would be very interesting to see.
Okay, and John, I'll present for like 3 minutes. Just what I sent to you.
Oh, for sure. My bad. Yes.
Okay.
And your conversation with Richard just reminded me that we probably should update the wiki so that a lot of the work that we have already worked on is a lot easier to find. So, Richard, I can't guarantee that this will get addressed in the next couple of weeks, but moving forward, we'll do a better job of updating the wiki so it's easier for folks who want to learn and know more to kind of find a lot of useful information, not just by joining the calls, but maybe also reading what's on the wiki. So I can certainly take an action on that and work with the OCP, with the OCP team to have that updated. So that's a good point. Thanks.
I think you do a very good job right the way across the OCP. It's just trying to navigate where it all is, really, from my perspective.
Go ahead, Jabari.
Yeah, I think my screen, right? So one of the comments I had, this is the original Door Heat Exchanger requirements document for ORV3. This was released in 2021. So they had lower down in the document a mock-up of a radio heat exchanger being attached to a rack. And you can see here in orange the manifold. Sorry, it always does that. Yeah, in orange the manifold. I guess, or that was originally there for in the original incarnation of a manifold, right? So you have here an orangey manifold connecting to the door heat exchanger. The gasket is in green around it. Red and blue are hot and cold, and then in purple below here you see the CDU. So what we were saying is at the base of this unit, you have all of these connections. You have green and orange for hot and cold on the manifold, and then you have connections to the CDU, and then you have connections to the door. And each of those units has an inlet and outlet. And it gets even more congested when you have concurrently maintainable deployment, if you choose to go that route, right? John mentioned the blind mate interconnect, and we had a presentation a couple months ago, and you can see here how it works. So in the new blind mate manifold, it's just meant to be a push connection with no hoses. All right. Sorry about that. So you see two manifolds on either side of the rack, hot and cold, and then for the blind mate interconnect, it just slides right into the chassis. That, I mean, it helps with the congestion in terms of the hoses, but now because of that, at the base of the unit, you may need larger hoses. I mean, we're not sure yet, but yeah, so it's just very congested at the base of the rack, and that's what we were kind of talking about before.
Yeah. This is the point I was talking about. Yeah, because in that way we can connect it for sure, but it will be better to have some standardized points of connections in order to be more easily to deploy this system, because with this kind of hoses will be difficult to open it to I don't know, maybe there is better options to connect the manifolds and the RPU, CDU to the reactor.
That was it from me.
Yeah, and I think also it's also dependent on how much flow rate you have. So I'm pretty sure this model over here use 3/4 inch ID hoses. So yes, they obviously have a much smaller bend radius, but then when you start looking into 1-inch hoses and larger, then then the bend radius starts becoming a concern too. So yeah, this is certainly challenging and certainly something we should look at. But like I said, it's and we should look into it. It's just something that requires requires mechanical engineering resources, which we'd probably have to plan for accordingly. Certainly doable. I just want to make sure that that's understood, because if we do it, we want to do it the right way to consider all the parameters and and then propose a solution. Then in that case, the question would be is, okay, can we make adjustments on the door side so that we don't have to go back and make changes or have to be too prescriptive on the manifolds or the in-rack CDU. So there are a bunch of things that we need to consider, and it'll be an interesting conversation, to say the least. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll stop presenting.
Yeah. Thanks for showing that, Jabari.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Yeah, I say thank you as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so Jabari, I'll take a look at your email and then follow up with you offline, though it'll probably be after 2 weeks. but I don't think we are in that much of a hurry. I think we can focus on putting the abstracts in for now, and then we can start looking at the material. Sounds good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, awesome. All right, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to give 10 minutes back, and thanks all for joining the call, and see you all talk to you all in a month's time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. See you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye, John, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, guys.